everyone, and welcome to Silicon Sounds, audio for the rest of us. It's been a minute, but I'm back with more reviews. Today I'm going to review an IEM from a company that is not that well known. It's from a company called Acousticwerkes. They're based in Singapore, and it's a brand that not many will be familiar with. Again, they're based in Singapore, producing a line of in-ear monitors as well as other accessories. They also offer a custom in-ear monitor molding service for those who wish to get the perfect fit. But the focus today is on the lowest model in their line. This is the Z02. It presently retails for $217 USD. And once again, it's the least expensive model in their line. But this does not mean that they've skimped on design or hardware in any way, shape, or form. The fit and finish is quite good, and we'll get into that a little bit later. What about the driver complement? Here we're talking about something that's very interesting. It's following a rising trend in that it mates a single 10mm, in this case graphene dynamic driver, with a miniature planar magnetic tweeter. This high-frequency driver type is seeing more use once again these days, with a few other IEMs from competitive companies or competing companies coming out as well. There are some inherent advantages to using this type of driver, including improved dispersion, transient response, etc. But as with all things tech, particularly when it comes to sound reproduction, it's not nearly the technology as it is how it is implemented. The tuning. Well, the Z02 falls somewhere between a V and a W shape. It's very pliable, and it really depends on the source material that you put into it. I can't be more definite than that at this moment, but maybe during the duration of this review, you'll understand why I came to that conclusion. It's not always about what the graph looks like. It's how do these sound in someone's ears. So here we go. It's relatively easy to drive, but do sound best with a warmer source. I will say that again. The Z02 sounds best with a warmer source. In fact, a warm source combined with these included tips from Advanced Acousticwerkes, these are the bass tips, yielded the best sound quality in this humble reviewer's opinion. I used the warmest source I can get a hold of in my arsenal, including an XDO MT602 hybrid tube amp. And while that did improve the sound, adding a touch of warmth to the overall presentation, unfortunately with the 602, there was a slight loss in resolution, as these IEMs are quite resolving when driven correctly. So let's go to fit and finish. Well manufactured. The 3D printed shells are of high quality with no visible edges. Very nicely done, extremely smooth, very well finished. It's black resin capped with a purple cap, colored cap. I believe this is the only color available at the time, with the branding prominently. Let me put it the right way. AAW, Acousticwerkes, Advanced Acousticwerkes. Very nicely done, the printed shells. Apart from that, we have the included accessories. I don't have them on the table with me except for the base tips. The tips are of pretty good quality. The retail presentation is nice. It doesn't set the bar higher or do anything extremely out of the ordinary, but it is nice. I will talk about the cable that's included with it. The cable, once again, OCC, oxygen-free copper, silver-plated. It's a nice cable, but it falls short with respect to haptics. It's quite thin, very pliable, but it is a good cable. You do have an option to have 3.5mm single-ended, or as I ordered, 4.4mm balanced. This is always a plus. But in the side note, when compared against, for example, the cable that came with the less expensive Shanling Tino, which has a very secure mount for different cable tips, much stiffer cable, but much nicer haptics, it does kind of fall short. It's not a throwaway, but it does fall short, considering that the Z02 is about $100 more expensive than the previously mentioned Shanling Tino. That being said, let us move on because the quality of the included components was good, has a nice carrying case, well done. But let's talk about the sound. We'll give you a closer look first at the IEM itself. It has a very extended nozzle. This is pretty good for some people. It is a smaller IEM. A little tip, you may find you have to go down a tip size. If you were using large, because these protrude so much, maybe a medium, you can try to get a much better fit because they'll go farther in your ear. It is essential in all IEMs, but in some in particular, such as the Z02, that you get a very good seal in order to preserve the bass quantity and quality. We can see that there's some venting here, and next to the 2-pin, and besides that is the 2-pin 0.78 millimeter mount for the cables, which is very common. So let's move on to the sound. Bass. The Z02 has a bass that goes fairly deep, not the deepest I've heard, but still really good, but is more mid-bass centric. Solid slam and speed in this bass. It's quite good, very articulate. The level of bass detail is very good. Great speed, articulation. When I was listening to Angel, for example, by Massive Attack, which is a track that has a long droning bass line, deep droning bass line, it kept the bass in its place. Excellent control at all times. Texture was easy to discern. On Inside Stuff by Wayman Tisdale, the beautiful tone of the bass guitar was in full sonic view, sounding really tight, the twang of the guitar tight and clean. But let's talk about the overall quality of this bass. The bass offered by the AAW Z02 is wonderful articulation, but there's a caveat. The lowest registers can feel lacking at times, as they do not offer enough push to counter what's happening in the upper mids and upper treble, and lower treble, I should say. As an experiment, not used for evaluation, I paired it with a hip DAC. By the way, the hip DAC 2, hip DAC 1. Hip DAC 3, hip DAC 1. I usually skip a generation. Has a function called X-Bass. One of the best designed bass boosts I've seen. Now, I'm not a person who actually likes equalization, but it did show me something very serious about the AWW. The bass capabilities of this IEM are fantastic, but the tuning has sort of neutered the deepest bass notes. They're still there, but when it's paired with the treble and upper mid quality or quantity, there seems to be a slight imbalance. Now, these two actually were the best mate for the Z02. They're Burr Brown based in terms of the DAC. They have just a more analog sound to them. The one sounding even more analog than the 3, but both of them sounding quite good. Nice touch of warmth. Those were a good pick. And overall, I have to tell you, the Z02 is very sensitive to what's driving it and the tips that are used. Let's talk about the mid-range. It is quite detailed. The Z02 is a mid-range that is detailed with good detail retrieval. A mix in macro and micro details are heard here. Instrument separation and layering is very noticeable, and notable, I should put out. When listening to one of my go-to tracks to test this, it is Beautiful Lie by Vic Lavender. It's a really busy track with copious amounts of percussion from different types of instruments. And I can tell you that I was impressed with the Z02's ability to keep everything in its place. I could easily hear all the different elements. It never sounded like a wall of sound. This is no minor feat, as most earphones, regardless of price, present this track as a wall of sound. Transients had a notable sharp attack, but the fall off, the decay in transients was not as organic. Particularly, for example, with cymbal clashes that go much higher up, I just felt the fall off, it just hung around too long to be rightfully organic in that way. There is a rise in the upper mid-range that is audible, a slight pinna gain with these, not slight, but audible pinna gain. The thing is, though, it doesn't sound like the typical rising pinna gain when presented with a dynamic driver or even a balanced armature. While harshness is thankfully kept to a minimum, and again, that is track selective. If the track's not recorded well, has a lot of upper frequency energy, you are going to hear a little bit of harshness from the Z02, but it was already in the track. There's sometimes an audible glare or shimmer that surrounds the notes in the upper mids and treble. And this is quite apparent. It just sounds a little bit different than what I'm used to hearing from, I should say, IEMs that are tuned similarly using different driver technologies. This does add some bite to female vocals, but at times it can be distracting when listening to cymbal work or strings, for example. With respect to male vocals, done very well. Lots of detail, if a little thin at times. But it does sound quite good. Female vocals do sit comparatively closer in the mix, sounding wonderfully detailed, but with that extra bite and emphasis. Timbre is good, but it suffers in the upper mid-range and treble because of the glare that was mentioned before. When listening to No Worries by the Robert Glasper Trio, fantastic track I use to, it has mostly acoustic instruments, double bass, the drummer and the drum kit, he just played so well by the drummer in that, and Robert Glasper, of course, on keyboards and piano. I just felt that the cymbal work at times became just a little bit more splashy than I would have liked. And that kind of didn't really spoil the track, but it did draw attention to itself. So here we have a mid-range that is detailed and articulate, but at times the experience is less than optimal due to how the upper mid-range is presented. Interestingly enough, when you play tracks on this IEM that don't have copious amounts of upper frequency energy, wow, all the detail, the resolution comes through, the mid-range actually steps forward a bit. This is why it's difficult when I talk about, is it V-shaped or is it W-shaped? It really depends what you throw at it. The mid-range can sound more immediate without having the upper mids and high frequencies jump out and basically take over the show. I'm not saying that this is an ultra bright IEM, it's just the way that the upper mids and treble is presented. The treble has great extension with generous quantities of sparkle and the air. Detail retrieval is very good, besting most of the recent IEMs I've heard recently. Listening to Vanston Place 12 AM by Ronnie Jordan revealed the clear space around the notes, which added to the airiness and overall euphoric, presentation of that track. But there's a nitpick, is that the amount of sparkle offered was at times overdone and did compromise the timbre and consequently organic nature of the sound. But again, this is track dependent, as I said before. Less treble forward tracks will sound incredibly detailed and articulate on these IEMs, while those that do excite the upper mids all the way up until the higher treble at times can have that extra bite that takes away from the naturalness of the sound, if only to a certain extent. And at sometimes, the best case scenario is it just sounds a little brighter. The worst case is it sounds somewhat unnatural. Conclusion. I purchased the advanced Acousticwerkes Z02 with my own money. This is not a giveaway or something for a review. I purchased these, looking for something out of the crowd of manufacturers that most people talk about. Has you ever heard of AAW? My quest for IEMs now has focused primarily on those that don't get a lot of attention and come from various parts of the world. Sonically, the Z02 has a fast taut bass with a well-detailed mids, an extended and airy treble. It also has standout layering and separation. That being said, there are some downsides. When we talk about layering and separation, for example, that adds to the overall really nice relaxed, chill feeling of the soundstage. Imaging is spot on, like dead spot on. Easy to pinpoint instruments. It's always open, never sounding compressed or crowded. And then little issues with the treble can kick in and kind of draw your attention away. There are downsides, of course. The occasional upper mid-range glare and overly crispy treble does veer off the path of the more natural organic sonics that I crave so much and found in some other IEMs. There, though, are enough positives that I do not regret my purchase. When it comes to music with heavy bass, these do come alive. The tuning is responsible for the bass. It's not the driver. The driver, as I've said before, can produce some prodigious heavy slam deep bass if it's in the track, but it's not balanced with the upper registers. There are enough positives that I do not regret my purchase once again. That being said, when I'm after a long, relaxing listening session, I will reach usually for something else, such as my beloved Timsock TS316 or the Shanling Tino, for example. Them being just more organic sounding. So let's do some comparisons and I'll have my last thoughts on this. I'll throw in some of the ones that I was talking about in the price range. Shanling Tino. I will be writing a review. They're hard to put together because their magnet is so strong, as you can see. The Shanling Tino overall has a more organic and I would say balanced sound. It has a better deep bass presentation. It is not slightly less fast or I should say abrupt in the bass as the Z02, but whatever the Shanling Tino plays just sounds so much more organic and natural. Treble is not as extended as the Z02. I believe the Tino uses two dynamic drivers, while this uses a 10 millimeter dynamic and a micro planar for the treble. But again, my preferences as a listener, not a reviewer, but as a listener, and consequently as a reviewer, are for natural organic sound. Transients that are sharp, but fall off believably, adding to the immersion into the music. Transients are slightly sharper on the Z02, but the overall experience on the Tino is, again, let me reuse that word, more organic. So when I want, and yet the Tino costs, I think $120, $100, just over 100 US. These are $217. Again, this fits my tuning style more. Now, one of my beloved IEMs I've had for a little while now is the High Senior Audio T4. 4 balanced armature drivers. Probably one of the best balanced armature only IEMs I've heard. In terms of detail retrieval, right away, T4. Why? Because there's no distractions as there could be sometimes depending on the track with the Z02. The T4 renders every track with a level of detail retrieval that is musical and pleasing, not to the point where it becomes sterile and distracting. With respect to bass, I'll give it to the Z02 when the track has a lot of bass. The Z02 bass has more slam and depth than the High Senior T4, but the T4 is no slouch in that department. Tight, articulate, musical bass, not your typical, what they call stereotypical, I should say, balanced armature bass. In terms of treble, in particular mids and upper mids, absolutely the T4, a more natural presentation, both depending on how things, the track can sound somewhat thin with male vocals. Of course, the T4 does have these tuning switches where you can tailor, you can add bass if you want. Even then, it doesn't really add to the sub bass. It's more of a mid bass boost, or you can add presence in the treble and so on. But the T4 still remains as what I call my reset set. As a reviewer, as a music lover who listens to a lot of different IEMs, it's a good idea to settle on those sets that reset your auditory sensitivities, as I would call. Very, very good IEM. So, in conclusion, am I damning this IEM? Absolutely not. The Z02 has so much promise. As where it does perform well, it does so exemplary. Speed of bass, detail retrieval. It's unfortunate that there are sonic distractions that can sometimes get in the way. I hope AAW comes out with a retuned Z02, maybe call it a Z02 Pro, where they address that, maybe a new generation of driver, or maybe it's just the tuning. Maybe they can do something with a active crossover or a passive crossover to kind of tone down that glare. Whatever it is, this is a good IEM. It's just bested by those others with respect to my own tuning preferences when it comes to listening to music long term. If you're listening to house music, lots of deep driving bass, maybe some jungle, these do quite well. Again, depending on your tolerance for treble. I am a person who likes IEMs that have a more treble, slightly treble focus, I would say, such as the T4, which are what I would call bright neutral tuned. The Tino is not. The Tino is what I would call balanced. Beautiful, beautiful IEM, by the way. I will have a review on that. But they've done well. It makes me interested to sample some of AAW's other IEMs and just make your decision yourself. My tuning preferences may not be yours, but with respect to long listening sessions, listening to smooth jazz and maybe a number of other different genres of music, my R&B, my reggae, my house, my jungle, this may not be the one I reach for all the time. Or if I do, I know that I'll be swapping them out after an hour or so, depending on what tracks I'm listening to. I want to thank you very much for joining me on this video. I will make one addendum though. When it comes to pairing the Z02 to get the best results, the bass tips do make a difference that ship with them. They ship with two sets of tips, bass tips or treble tips, please, the bass tips. I used it at first with my Hibby R4, my beloved Hibby R4 DAP, not a good mix. Hibby DAP is a lot cleaner sound, slightly brighter, has a touch of warmth, but really brought out the negatives of the Z02. And this DAP is awesome, by the way, for the price. Wow. I moved over to a warmer sound of the Iffy, the iFi Hip DAC 1, Hip DAC 3. On the 3, you can use the bass match feature, which is like adding an ohm resistor to the sound. It does tailor it a bit. You can do that. Very versatile, but it did get the best out of the Z02, and that's what I used. I actually used the 3 for most of my evaluation. So there you have it. Thanks again for joining me. Keep watching my videos. More will be coming out. The next one will be, I believe, the Shanling Tino, if something else comes around as well. And good to have you back. Spread the word. Take care, everybody.